Mario Barrios versus Fabian Maidana. 12 rounds for Barrios' WBC interim welterweight title. Let's get into it. Let's start with El Azteca. 28 wins, 2 losses, and 18 wins by way of knockout. Man, I say it every time that we do a Mario Barrios video, man. I have to say it. This man has one of the best nicknames in the sport today. But man, I rock with Barrios. I think he's a dark horse at 147. Now that Bud seems to be moving up, maybe Barrios can get an opportunity to fight for the belt since he is the interim champion. But from my understanding, Bud hasn't vacated the other belts apart from the IBF, and Barrios is the WBC interim champion. So of course we'll see how that one plays out. But one thing about El Azteca is that he's going to give you a tough fight, man. Even when he lost to Tank, he was in the mix for the whole fight. Leading up to the 11th, 2 judges had that fight 96-94, if I remember correctly. Now, that was at 140 pounds. And I think at 147, he's been able to find his stride and his groove. He took a tough fight after fighting Tank to fight Keith one-time Thurman. Now, Keith Thurman might catch a lot of slack and hits for his inactivity, and that's fair. But when Thurman gets into the ring, man, like, he's a handful. Thurman is an experienced fighter. He's a smart fighter, a very skillful fighter, and he still got good pop in his punches. Barrios did take a lot of punches in that fight, man. He got caught a few times with some shots that really hurt him, but he never backed down. He never fell. He kept coming forward and kept fighting. When he was using his jab and going to the body, he was able to have success against Keith Thurman. You remember when Barrios hit him to that body and Keith Thurman took his mouth guard off. You don't do stuff like that if certain shots did not hurt you. But Thurman's athleticism and speed were an asset for him in the ring. Thurman was leaping into punches, hooking into punches, and Barrios hurt with some of those shots. Some of those shots really hurt Barrios, man, especially the looping, the lunging, looping hooks that connected, man, because he was able to generate everything. And when you're able to really sit down on your punches, as you know, when it lands, they're definitely going to feel it. But he wasn't able to get Barrios out of there. So the man has a chin. He's a very tough cat. It wasn't his night in his first fight at 147, but he did bounce back and put forth an excellent performance against Joaquin Santiago, where I felt like his skill set was on full display. He was very sharp on the night, good pressure, calculated punches, punched in combinations, and didn't neglect the jab. He was also better defensively. I thought he did a great job of mixing up the variation of his attacks so he wasn't predictable, and he was able to get a stoppage in the 8th round. And Santiago was, landing some good shots of his own. Santiago was lunging and trying to loop some of those shots in. So maybe he was watching some of that Keith Thurman, Mario Barrios tape, right? And Thurman was able to have success when he did it, but it looked like El Azteca made the right adjustments, and he was able to evade some of those punches that Thurman was having success with when he used it against him. So it was a great bounce back win for Mario Barrios to get back into the win column. Now, in his most recent fight, he fought your Dennis Ugas. I remember doing the breakdown of that fight, man. And while Ugas was the betting favorite, he was coming off of a massive fight against Errol Spence, where Spence just broke him down, man, and didn't just break him down, but really just beat him up, right? And when fights like that happen, you're just not sure. You're just not the same fighter right away when you come back into it, right? And Barrios was coming off of a wicked performance, and he's just an all-around good, solid fighter. So I felt that Barrios, the timing was right for the victory. Now, when the fight started, you could see that Dennis Ugas was kind of taking a similar approach to when he fight Manny Pacquiao. One shot at a time, loading up on the punches and trying to use his size and strength to his advantage. But you aren't going to beat Mario Barrios with one shot at a time, right? And unless you got that knockout type of power like a Gervonta Tank Davis, right? Ugas was aggressive early and his aggression worked against him in the early rounds of that fight, man, because Barrio caught him with a jab just as Ugas was coming with the right hand. It was short and snappy and powerful, and Ugas hit the canvas. And remember, Ugas's eye was beat up, man, when he fought Spence, and Barrios was targeting that same spot, and Ugas's eye was starting to get more swollen and swollen and swollen until that thing looked completely shut. And I felt like it was kind of downhill from there for Ugas. Not that Ugas didn't have great moments, because he did have some really good moments. I thought he countered Barrios very well, and he stood his ground when he needed to, and he was fighting with everything that he had. But you just got the sense that, man, when Barrios was landing his shots, he was the one that was hurting Ugas a little bit more than Ugas was able to hurt Barrios. Barrios was able to back up Ugas a lot more. And then, going into that 12th round, everything started to unravel for your Dennis Ugas, man. Barrios dropped him with the shot. Ugas got a point taken away for spitting out his mouth guard, and Barrios was able to get the win. And it was a great win because it was a former champion on his resume at 147 and a big name, so to speak. So Barrios is coming into this fight with a lot of confidence, man, a lot of belief, and he knows what's at stake here. But he definitely can't take Fabian Maidana for granted. Let's talk about his opponent. Maidana, 22 wins, 2 losses, and 16 wins by way of knockout. Now, when you think about the name Maidana, you're like, man, that name sounds very familiar. Like, where have I heard that from? And if you're having those thoughts, then you're absolutely right if you connected those dots. Fabian is the younger brother of Marcos Maidana, and like his brother, man, he can punch too. He does have power. I forgot what fight it was, man, but it was a fight that I seen of him where his opponent was throwing like a lazy jab, and he thought he was doing something with that jab, and he was taking the jab out and kind of moving, and Fabian just put that right hand forward, and it went through his high guard, landed on his chin, and knocked his opponent clean out, floored him, and that fight was over with. However, for me, and this is just my general opinion, man, I'm trying to figure out where Maidana is and kind of who he is. You know what I'm saying, right? Like, Robert Garcia used to train him at the beginning parts of his career. And I watched some videos of him, and Robert Garcia was talking about him. And Robert Garcia said, he questioned Maidana's discipline. And he said, and I quote, "There are questions about his dedication as well, too. But you always got to take that with a grain of salt, because, you never know what a relationship is like with the fighter and their trainer. Maybe it didn't end on the greatest terms. But when you watch certain fights of Maidana, you can kind of see what Robert Garcia is talking about. He lost his first fight when he fought, I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Pera. And I felt like Maidana looked okay in that fight. Kind of hesitant most of the night, but he did come on strong in the last few rounds of that fight. His opponent, Pera, was controlling the pace of the fight, and he was on the front foot, putting pressure on Maidana, but calculated pressure, jabbing to the head, jabbing to the body, changing angles and how he was throwing his punches, trying to slow down Maidana and limit that power that Maidana has from him landing his shots cleanly. He caught Maidana with some clean counters, but Maidana in the fight, to me, man, he just didn't throw enough. Right? If he would have let his hands go, he would have been able to at least get the momentum back and possibly even hurt Pera. But he just didn't let his hands go consistently enough. There are times in the fight where he looked disinterested in the fight, man. Like, he didn't look interested in the fight. Like, he waited to the last 2 rounds to let his hands go, and he wasn't hitting his opponent cleanly either. But he did commit to letting his hands go late. You can't always wait till the last minute to let your hands go, man. And that, for me, in that fight, that was one of the biggest differences to why he lost that fight. He'd go on to win his next 2 fights before losing to Francisco Mercado, someone who, on paper, he was supposed to break this cat down on paper. But of course, on paper doesn't tell the full tale, because at the end of the day, you have to get into the ring and see how the fight is going to play out. And you can never rule anybody out. But on paper, this was a fight that he wasn't really supposed to have a lot of problems with, because he was much more experienced than Mercado. Scheduled for a 10-round fight, And again, I felt the same thing. Maidana looked uninterested in the fight to me personally. He was hesitant and he seemed like he didn't want to really engage. Like he was there, but he wasn't doing a whole lot to me personally, right? He should have been able to stop Mercado. Mercado wasn't hurting him. He wasn't fighting a bad fight either. He didn't look the greatest either. And I thought on points on one of the judges' cards, they had Maidana up. But you know, it just didn't look right, man. But there were some questionable things that I have in this fight as well, too. In the 7th round of that fight, they stopped the fight because of a head clash, and the ref came up and looked at the cut, and eventually he stopped the fight. He ended up losing the fight because he lost on the scorecard. But in his most recent fight, he fought Israel Lopez, and I thought that was a much better performance, man. He was more engaged on the night. He moved well in the ring. He used this jab. He was connecting with that right hand, and he was hurting his opponent, man. And he just looked more engaged. And because he was more engaged, he was able to have more success, man. I thought if he fought like that in the fights that he lost, he would have won those fights, man. Because he does have, he's got a good power, and he does have a lot of upside. Like he is a good, solid fighter. But as Robert Garcia said, man, if a trainer questions your discipline and a trainer questions your focus, man, you know, usually that's not because they want to say something if it's not true. So we'll see what Maidana looks like on the night, and his heart and dedication to the work seems to be in question and brought up in interviews and from other people. So it's going to be interesting to see which version of him comes out on the night. So who wins? I like El Azteca to win this fight, man. He's going to need to come in and just box and bring calculated pressure, you know, and try to stay and limit the right hand of Maidana, man, because he does have a strong right hand and he can punch. Yeah, Barrios has a good chin, but you know, anyone can be hurt. And we've seen Barrios hurt, and the right punch at the right time from a guy who can punch could be the shot that takes you out, man. Maidana, when he is locked in and focused, man, he is a good, solid fighter, and he's got upside. He's got potential. I think Maidana needs to fight with his skill and his heart on the night. Barrios is not going to make it easy by no means. He's not going to come in and lay down for nobody. He's going to fight his fight, and he's going to make you dig deep in order to beat him. So if the going gets tough, man, what's Maidana going to do? You know, what's that going to look like? And I think if your heart isn't 100% inside of the ring at some point, it's going to work against you. But Maidana could come into this fight and disrupt the whole thing. Like he could get a stoppage here. He could come in and look absolutely fantastic. And of course, we'll know what he looks like completely on the night. And if I remember correctly, if memory serves me correctly, I believe it's Maidana's first 12-round fight as well. Barrios isn't new to this, man. He's been true to this 12-round fights. So he knows how to gauge himself. He knows how to handle the nerves. He knows how to maneuver, man. I like Mario Barrios by decision in this fight. So that's my opinion. I would love to hear your opinion. Who do you think wins? Who do you like in this one? Let me know in the comment section below. If you're enjoying the videos, enjoying the content, getting something from it, man, then I hope that you subscribe to the channel. And if you know someone that likes boxing, likes to talk life, then definitely share this channel with them as well. So with all that being said, I'll definitely see you next time.